So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Protiviti and Robert Half Collaboration Forum. My name is Paul Middleton, and this is our weekly forum. This is the 10th and final forum of our 5th series, but don't worry, we'll be back again with a new series very soon. But for now, it's great to see you all here, some familiar faces and some new faces alike, and thank you very much for joining us. Since March of last year, our weekly forum has been aiming to invigorate, challenge and inspire us all to be bold, to look beyond our computer screens, to stand up and think differently, as well as to bring optimism in what has been for so many a time of disruption, uncertainty and change. Over the months, our forum has become a place for today's business leaders and our business leaders of tomorrow to talk to each other, learn from each other, challenge each other and gain confidence from each other's perspectives and experiences. And that aim is the same today as it's always been. This is your forum. It's not a closed forum. You're not muted and it's pretty informal. And our aim is for all of you to get involved, to make your voice heard and make your opinions heard, or at least to put those comments in the chat. A thread that has run through all of our forums is that now is the time to think differently and to be actioning both those big and small ideas. We believe at Robert Half and Protiviti that if we don't proactively drive change during this continued period of disruption, we run the risk of rapidly becoming irrelevant and falling behind the pack. And that risk is greater now than ever. As we begin to unlock and head back into our offices, our fear that we've discussed so many times in this forum is that we might sleepwalk back into the past and into our old working habits, leaving behind those COVID mindsets that we've developed, a mindset that has given us a newfound ability to drive change at a rate we previously thought impossible and to achieve things that we were told could not be done. In other words, over the last 14 months, we've successfully broken an office-based 9-to-5 working pattern that's been with us for centuries and which was well overdue a change, but we just couldn't achieve that change without something so disruptive as a global pandemic. So our challenge and our rallying cry to you all in this forum is not to march backwards and fall into your old habits and lose everything you've achieved over the last 14 months. Because if you do, you can be sure that others won't, and you'll simply fall behind. Instead, we want you to be brave, to be bold, and to imagine what the future can be and how you can grasp it. And this week, to achieve just that, we'll be bringing together the strands and the threads of all of our previous forums in this series to discuss what the future of work and the future of our workplace looks like. We've covered so much ground in the last 10 weeks. We've talked about the future of culture, the future of healthcare, the future of the economy, the future of social justice and inclusion, the future of ESG and the future of success, the future of technology, the future of AI. And if you missed any of those, you would like some inspiration, you can find all the recordings from the series on our website. But today we're looking at all of these together and asking, what do all these mean for you? And what does all this mean for how we'll work together in the future? But most importantly, what does it mean for you? And as ever, we're lucky enough to have some great panelists to guide us through that debate, to challenge our thinking and to inspire us. So I'm delighted firstly to introduce James Ghaffari. James is Director of Growth and Product at B Corp. B Corp work with and are building a community of leaders and companies that drive a global movement of people using business as a force for good. James and his team work with companies to certify them as certified B corporations, B Corps for short, meaning that they meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency and legal accountability. B Corps are the building blocks of a new system creating a solid foundation of positive impact, recognizing more clearly than ever that we cannot return to business as usual. And it's exactly because of this disruptive vision, as well as their ESG and sustainability imperative themes that we've discussed so many times in this forum, that we thought James would bring some fascinating insights into what our future of work could be. James has been with B Corp for 2 years and has spent his career working at the nexus of business and charity. He previously held an innovation role at an international women's and girls' rights charity and has also worked connecting multinationals and local SMEs in sub-Saharan Africa to support the growth of inclusive business environments. So delighted to welcome James to our forum today and look forward to hearing from him shortly. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Matt Weston. Matt is a managing director and UK business leader for Robert Half. He's been with Robert Half for over 21 years, and with that experience brings a fascinating insight into the workforce of tomorrow, drawn from a huge portfolio of UK businesses and clients, and how needs of the employers are changing, as well as the demands of the employees. In leading a large UK recruitment business during this volatile period, Matt has also been at the forefront of shaping Robert Half's own workplace of the future, including hybrid working models, mental health initiatives, and employee engagement. So again, thank you to Matt for joining us today. And thirdly, I'm delighted to welcome back Peter Richardson, Managing Director from Protiviti. When Peter's previously appeared on this forum, I've introduced him as the leader of Protiviti's UK business. But since April, he's had a new role, and that has been to lead our Protiviti strategy and thinking globally around the future of work and the future of our workplace, not just for us in Protiviti, but also for our clients. So who better to join us in a forum to discuss exactly that today? And Peter, before I come to you to kick us off, I just wanted to remind everyone for one last time to get involved. Stick your hand up, write your comments in the chat. This is a huge topic that we've got today, and we're going to take some bite-sized chunks, but most importantly, we can go in the direction that you, our attendees, take us. So the more you get involved, the more relevant it will be to you. So Peter, just to kick us off, what do you see as some of the biggest changes over the past year that point towards what our future of work and our future workplace will be?
Just making sure I'm off mute first, Paul, before I start the talk. Hence the slight delay.
You had me worried there for a minute.
So first of all, thanks for the opportunity to be here, and well done to the team for getting us to the end of Series 5. It's been fascinating, and I think today's discussion is going to be interesting. Listen, let me say first of all that I'm going to talk primarily about office-based workers. You know, my role doesn't really focus on manufacturing and retail, so it's not really about work that's not really site-based or particular equipment-based. Having said that, when you think about it, we used to look at our businesses even as office workers in a pretty rigid way, you know, based primarily on a manufacturing model. People worked in fixed locations close to where they lived. You know, they got up at the same time every day, stayed in the same place to do the stuff we needed them to do in that one location. And the old world paradigm, you know, the pre-mobile phone and internet operating model really was based on the idea that people spent pretty much 100% of their time in an office, 100% of their time getting up early, 100% of their time commuting, you know, to do those things, to be in a place that provided a physical presence for management to oversee and to control. And when you think about it, that model is pretty outdated. And we've learned, therefore, an awful lot over the course of the past 12 months. You know, we've put ourselves to the tests, and businesses have, in many, many instances, been able to come up with actually better ways of doing things against that model. We're getting access to more talent in different locations with more creativity and more flexibility. And in many instances, we've made many of those changes much more quickly than we've ever done before. We'll probably come on and talk about this, I guess, a little bit later, but there's some McKinsey research that says that, you know, when asking CEOs about 12 significant changes that they've made over the course of the last 12 months, it was research that happened at the beginning of this year, and how long it took them to execute those same changes before the crisis, many said that their companies acted 20 to 25 times faster than they'd expected. So we've certainly learned to do things more quickly. We've learned to do things differently, and I expect that to continue. But we're having as well to live and learn how to deal with what I would call a few paradoxes, and I'll just give you a couple. You know, there's this question of remote versus in-person time. On the one hand, 70% of workers want to continue with more flexible remote working options in some shape or form. And at the same time, 65% of those same workers are craving more in-person time with their teams, you know, craving being back together. And we've got to solve for that paradox. There's a question of improved effectiveness and efficiency versus fatigue and exhaustion. I think there are some numbers from Unilever where they say that 22%, and this is for their office-based workers, that their productivity has increased by 22%, their collaboration has increased by 30%, the extent of their external orientation has increased by 19%. So that's improving, but at the same time, there is no doubt, that there's a very significant degree of fatigue and exhaustion in the workforce with the existing model, and we've got to solve for that too. When you look at satisfaction, a sort of satisfaction index for older versus younger workers, the satisfaction index level for older workers is around 61% for more established workers, bosses, if you like, who are more thriving right now, and yet it's down at 38% for those without decision-making authority. And in particular, Gen Zers, those between 18 and 25, are struggling to balance work with life often, and are more exhausted than their counterparts. So they're less engaged and not excited about work, feel that they maybe can't get a word in during meetings. So we've got to solve for that too. So I could go on. There's an awful lot that's happening and an awful lot of what we've got to solve for. But I think I'd say, the COVID-19 crisis is actually a tipping point of, without exaggerating, possibly historic proportions. The pace of change is actually unlikely to slow down. More changes will be required as the economic and human situations evolve. Remote work's created new job opportunities. It's offered more family time. It's provided options for whether and when to commute. But we have to deal with those challenges. And what we'll see though, and it will be critical to do, is to learn and experiment, particularly I think over the next 6 to 12 months, experiment with technologies, experiment with organizations and operating models, and how to manage change at a pace that will continue to exceed prior performance.
Peter, thank you for that. Matt, coming to you, with everything Peter said there, those eye-opening statistics around kind of 25 times faster pace of change, everything like that. When you're speaking to clients and candidates about hiring and new roles, what's changed in terms of both the skill sets that hirers prioritize, but also the qualities in a company that candidates are not just looking for, but demanding?
Yeah, so first of all, good morning, everyone. Great to be here. So as everyone knows, work patterns have totally changed. And we've done a recent survey. We call it the demand for skilled talent. We take this from our own CRM system, Salesforce. We take it from LinkedIn, Rigor Research, and Burning Glass. And 80%, 86% of companies are extremely confident for the future. There is massive demand out there. We're seeing unprecedented job flow in the industry at the moment. If you look at we have various different lines of business. Our perm lines of business are growing rapidly. People are very comfortable with remote onboarding, virtual hiring. The interim market's starting to really pick back up. So that's really, really exciting. And I think, we're starting to see the interim market really pick up now. There were some challenges around R35. People are adapting to that. So the flexible workforce is really picking up. And from a flow perspective, in this pace of rapid change, we're seeing it in numerous vacancies coming up, not pre-pandemic. And we are actually now ahead of our pre-pandemic job flow. So we're officially, in a better place than we were. But 3% of our roles were multiple roles. So normally we'd have ones and maybe twos, but now 31% of our roles are more than 5. So what it's showing is that people are massively focused on scaling up. The pent-up demand is out there, and it's really picking up. So from a client perspective, it's very, very strong. The interesting fact from a candidate perspective, 48% of candidates are actively looking at the moment. So when you consider there's 3 main reasons of what's going on in the marketplace. I was looking pre-pandemic. The second major reason is I'm not happy with my company. I'm not happy with my manager. And the third one, which is growing rapidly than ever, which is a new one on me, and we're seeing this in Robert Half, is I love my company. I love my manager. I just got to do something different. I just feel that this reflection, I thought about it, I've had more time, I can't go on holiday. So the thing that they can change at the moment is their job. And I think that's the biggest thing at the moment. And when you look at the demand at the market, 23% of companies are looking to expand and 70% are looking to maintain. And when you look at that 70% and effectively half are actively looking, the tsunami of talent or tsunami of turnover coming is unbelievable. And what are people looking for in companies? You know, they're looking for ownership, they're looking for autonomy. You know, you can't, have an autocratic style of managing anymore. People want career path mapping, they want choices, and ultimately they want training and development. Absolutely critical. The key skills at the moment, it's the hybrid skills to match the hybrid working of soft skills, technical skills, and those are things, communication, influencing, and from a sort of technical skill, given an overview, and I might drill down into some of the key skill sets or jobs that we're seeing is process skills management, digital, data, change management. They're the kind of key things. But, to Peter's point, the pace of change, the way the market's changing, I've never seen anything like it. I've been at Robert Half 22 years. I've worked in a number of challenging downturns, but what's coming out the back of this is unbelievable. And the pace of change and the war for talent is never before seen.
No, thank you, Matt. I mean, that's a tremendously optimistic message and great thing to hear, but also quite eye-opening with 48% of people actively looking. That really is a surprising statistic. But James, if I can turn to you, because ESG has been a topic that we've come back to almost every week in this season, not just ESG, but the renewed imperative for companies and people to be doing the right thing, a better thing, as we come through this pandemic and come out the back of it. How do you think the pandemic has caused a shift in how companies are looking at ESG imperatives?
Thanks. Yeah, and firstly, thanks for having me, and delighted to be on the forum. I just wanted to start by drawing a line really from ESG to what we're talking about today, workers and the future of work. When we talk about ESG or we talk about sustainability, to debunk or demystify it, we're really just talking about, are you engaged in a meaningful and intentional kind of relationship and conversation with your stakeholders, and your stakeholders being those groups who are affected by or who affect your business. And so if you see it through that lens, your workforce, employees, are almost the most significant kind of stakeholder. They are the most kind of the biggest driver between, the biggest driver for the success of your business. And so, yes, what we've seen is a pretty phenomenal step change in businesses engaging in this. And I wanted to kind of just echo Matt's point about the pace of change. Like, I've never seen a pace of change kind of quicker than this. The conversations around sustainability have been around for 20 years or more, but the way in which businesses are actually engaging with it over the last 12 months has been fascinating and inspiring to see. And so I'm still trying to kind of work out what the mechanisms are behind that. I think one of them is that companies have more time to work on the business. Some companies have been affected significantly by the pandemic, and so those kind of day-to-day business operations have taken a back seat, and it's allowed businesses to kind of step back and go, okay, well, we did all of these things in one way before. Maybe that way was just the way it happened to be. Let's look at this in a more intentional way, and let's try and pick up those projects that were maybe on the back burner and actually kind of build a business that we want to see. And actually, I think that's a little bit to your point previously, Paul, about let's not sleepwalk back. And I think that energy is something that I'm really seeing. Let's not just do things the way they were before. Let's be really intentional about the way in which we interact with society, the environment, and very importantly, with our workforce. And one other thing that I think is a mechanism behind this big shift into sustainability is around the viewing of this kind of change or this crisis as potentially the start of just a large period of crises or change to come. And so companies are viewing sustainability or ESG as a mechanism to build resilience. And what's behind that really is that they are engaging in kind of working this muscle that requires them to dialogue consistently with their employees, with the environment, with society, with their suppliers, to build really strong relationships. And it's those strong relationships that build resilience and help you transition through crises and actually come out the other end a bit stronger. And finally, I just wanted to kind of touch on what I kind of see as a mindset shift. And I think Peter really referred to this earlier, is that the pandemic has created a shift in the way in which people are thinking about their lives. And I think if people are rethinking about their lives, then they're going to have different expectations of one of the biggest parts of their lives, which is work. And so there's kind of an expectation that people are coming back to work with, that their work is reflecting their values and the things that they've seen as important over this time of change. And also they also want to engage in that process and actually kind of contribute to the company becoming more sustainable, better for the environment, better for its people, and ultimately a better business going forward. So yeah, I would say it's been a massive shift, and companies have pretty much doubled down on their sustainability efforts.
James, thank you for that. Lots to unpack there, and we'll come back to a number of the themes there you've mentioned. I can already see the questions coming in from 4-day week to other things. I'll come to those in a moment. So let's take a lead then from what you said then, James, into a very practical implication of that, our office. Peter, should we be considering radical redesigns now, given everything everyone said, the pace of change, everything you said about everything that James has just mentioned as well about changing in expectations? Should we be looking at a radical redesign of our office footprint, our office space internally, how we think about our offices?
Yes.
Good. I'll move on.
I'd first of all like to just think about this question of office versus work. And one of the comments I'd like to make is that we should be clear that, work is not a place. And people seem to get a little bit confused about that. There's an awful lot of talk about people going back to the office. Some leaders, some very prominent leaders, have made it absolutely clear that people need to return, while others are exploring, what's referred to as these hybrid models between the office and other places. But I think fundamentally that people are still confused and talking about the office as work rather than as a place to go to work. And there is a big difference. And if people continue to think about the challenge in these terms, and focus on where people are going to be on given days, they'll maybe get a better answer. So people need to fundamentally rethink, rebuild, reimagine, I think, their business operations, and that ranges from where they work, how they work, what work means, even through to things like, how does this give us an opportunity at the extreme to think about how many meetings we have, how much we travel, what our office footprint means in terms of carbon footprint. And I think, therefore, that we need to start talking much more about how we involve, include, and engage our people wherever they're located. So our physical locations need to be equipped and designed to achieve whatever they need to do, wherever our people are actually working from, i.e. whether they're in that physical location or not. So let me be clear, I'm not talking about a world where people stay permanently out of the office, but I am talking about a world where we're smart around the reasons for bringing people together. Let's not go back, as we were saying before, to that world where people are in an office because of an old manufacturing style, previous old industrial revolution paradigm, and think about the use cases for why people need social interactivity and why people need to be together. And some of those are collaboration, connection, celebration, compassion, but not about presenteeism and not about lack of trust. What we should have learned, and I think we've proven over the course of the last 15 months, we can trust our people to deliver wherever they are. You know, the old industrial revolution driven office environment is entirely about having people in front of you. And that raises issues about trust. And I think we need to dispel the myth that we need those people in front of our noses in order to be able to manage them and controlling them. I can't understand why people feel that going back to a world that is managed in that way is beneficial. And I'd argue that demanding employees to come back into the office 5 days a week to do what they used to do will actually create a backlash from those employees. As Matt said, he quoted 48% of people actively looking at alternatives. I've previously heard that number to be 40, so it's going up. People are considering their options, and if you force them back into a world that doesn't solve those paradoxes I was talking about, doesn't solve for the fact that people on the one hand want to be together with their colleagues, but on the other hand want flexibility. We've learned a different lifestyle. We've learned what it's like now to be able to operate in a much more autonomous way. And asking work employees to come back into an office 5 days a week or even 3 or 4 days a week to do things in the old way will not solve for that. And let's not forget either, you know, we're in a consulting business. All our clients have exactly the same challenge and opportunities to consider with their staff. So we've got to work in a way that fits in with how they're operating and what they're expecting from us in terms of our service delivery. And solving for that doesn't mean doing things the old way. It actually means fundamentally rethinking what we work, how we work, where we work, and what work means.
Peter, thank you. And thank you everyone as well for the questions coming through. They're fantastic. And one of those, I think, just builds on what you're saying, Peter, in terms of thinking differently. James, there's a question come through about, you know, should we as part of this be looking to move towards a 4-day working week? Because it's been highlighted, I think Jill's highlighted it, you know, it's been tried successful in New Zealand and will shrink emissions by 127 million tonnes. Lots of compelling arguments there, but do you think that is a step too far, or that's something that we should now be looking at?
No, I think it all stems from the mindset of each individual business. I mean, Peter's been very clear to say, you know, he's speaking on behalf of kind of office working, and it's not, you know, it doesn't mean that all of these kind of solutions are going to be right for a manufacturing or a agricultural business. And so I think it all stems from the individual business and what it's trying to achieve and what it's trying to stand for. And so I think as a business leader, you really need to be kind of very clear about what you want to stand for. And if you want to be very intentional about kind of standing for what your employees are going to be expecting when they come back to work. And what I mean by that is there is a growing expectation that business contributes to, you know, solving some of these big social and environmental challenges that we have right now. And so if as a business leader you want to set up your business to be one that, yes, is profitable, but also is making commitments to the environment, to society, to its people, then what you really need to do is to engage in a meaningful dialogue with your stakeholders, and actually to make sure that you are flexible and not kind of driven by the old models that have been in place for, you know, 200 years odd. And so I think that's the big thing going forward, is basically communication. Talk to your employees and your workforce and be flexible about the solutions. So in doing that, it could be that, you know, a 4-day week is something that you can go forward and trial, and you can monitor productivity and monitor wellness and monitor, you know, how that has actually contributed to the overall long-term success of the business. But, you know, how this paradigm works when we're talking about, for instance, office footprints, is that, you know, what some of the statistics we heard earlier, as a business leader, you could say, well, you know, we want to be really good for our employees, so we're not going to bring them back to the office. but that means that, you know, that could be great for some of the managers, the people in their, later in their careers. But a lot of young people could see that as really challenging because they won't be able to actually get the kind of knowledge and skills transfer that they actually need. And so don't make kind of big decisions without engaging in a dialogue with your employees. And likewise with the actual kind of hybrid working models, you know, if you want to be a business that's good for the environment, don't just assume, oh, well, we won't come back to the office, because, you know, I think research has shown that, you know, in the winter, home working can be up to 80% worse for the environment than being in the office because of the way in which we heat our houses. And so you've got to be really intentional and thoughtful about how you actually put in place these policies that actually are kind of downstream from the mindset that you've kind of decided to run your business on.
James, thank you for that. So let's then just dig into a little bit more about what that model might be. Matt, we've talked a number of times about this hybrid working model. Do you see hybrid working as a threat to all the ambitions we've been discussing here, or will it be a working model that absolutely we need to support our future?
Paul, so the hybrid model is here to stay. It's the way forward. Clients, and I'll talk through some data shortly. Clients are driving this. Candidates want this. I think it's interesting. You've seen a lot of debate where people have been, you know, all out fully remote, but it looks like, you know, and those are the tech companies, but you can see them all coming back to a hybrid model. Through our research, 89% of hiring managers say it's here to stay. From a Robert Half perspective, internally, it's never worked better. And I'm someone who was in the office 7 till 7, and sometimes we would stay late on a Monday to check in with our candidates, and we'd do corporate hospitality, we'd check in with people, we'd have events. I think what people want is an environment of trust. Do they want a 4-day week? We don't talk about 4-day weeks when clients come to us or candidates. People want whatever it takes to get the job done. And I think they want a trusting environment. And when you have a trusting environment, people conform. I think it's all about the intensity of the work. It's making the hours count rather than counting the hours. So when you see that, it's unbelievable. And when you come to the research, you know, 56% of our roles now, the clients will take a fully remote candidate. They all talk about hybrid working. So when you look at that, it's interesting. We have a 23 branch network across the UK. And pre-pandemic, we filled 4% of our roles out of an office. Now it's at 43%. So we are, when you look at what the clients have, they have access to a national pool of individuals. Candidates have available to national roles. So the opportunities are massive. And it's a really good opportunity out there. And it just shows you this is the way forward. You know, you can see the major cities through our research that are driving hybrid working are London, Manchester, Bristol, Birmingham and Leeds. And through our survey on candidates, you know, we did this on thousands of individuals, but 67% of candidates will call themselves a home dweller. They work from home. Only 23% call themselves an office dweller, and that's declining month on month. And then you have 8% who call them a coffee shop dweller, whereby they don't work at home and they don't work in the office. So when you look at that, it's you know, it just shows you that it's here to stay. And as an employer and driving your brand, if you don't have a hybrid, flexible, trusting environment, you're not. Firstly, you're going to lose all your people, and secondly, you're not going to hire any new people. So, from a strategic advantage, if you don't understand this and drive this and get this into the fabric of your business and your employer brand, you know, the slower you move, the faster you die in this.
Thank you, Matt. It's interesting and reflecting on yes, Peter, sorry.
I'd just like to say, you know, that I heard someone comment the other day, and I think this is probably true. You know, some organisations with very big brands and very deep pockets may be able to cajole and coerce their people into a model that isn't quite as hybrid as we're all talking about. But for the majority of organisations, that won't be the case. So you'll have to invest an awful lot to keep people without changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because there've been a couple of comments in the chat that really are reflecting on how, and I guess the question to all three of you, but I mean, have we seen a shift of power here? Have we seen on the pendulum of employee, employer, workers, everything you're saying is that, okay, our employees now have more of a choice. We need to do more to engage them. You know, we've shattered that old working model, but at the same time, there's a lot of individual viewpoints around here. So how do we manage that? How do we manage that shift maybe to the employee choice, but also create that one viewpoint?
Maybe I kick that off. I think, you know, it is more, the paradigm has shifted to the candidate and the employee. I think companies now have to move away from the selection game to the attraction game. That is absolutely critical.
Peter, James, on that?
Yeah, I agree. At the same time, there is more of an emphasis coming back on I'm afraid it's back to this paradox again. We've got to solve the equation for three main constituencies. We've got to solve it for our employers, for our clients, and for the employees. And that, you know, often as we've been debating, the perspectives there are contradictory, are polarized. And therefore, you can't solve that either by going back to the old way you used to do things, because they don't come from that way, or by staying where we are, or by trying what we're trying to do now in the old way of doing things. You've actually got to come up with a new answer. You've got to come up with a different way of doing things. You've got to think about the way you operate in a way that solves for all of those. And that means we're entering now a period, I think, of significant experimentation and change. The smartest organizations are probably those that admit they don't know the answer at the moment. You know, there is no black and white answer. We're going to have to try out a lot of different options and experiment. Some will succeed and some will fail. You know, it'll be a very agile world that we're entering as we experiment with these challenges. And you know, without being too much of a doom-monger here, you know, we're coming towards the end of one tunnel, but there's another one ahead of us, which is going to actually signal, I think, even more change than we've been through so far, as we learn to make this work across all of those competing constituencies and understand how to make it work for all.
Absolutely. I mean, Peter, I heard someone the other day saying that this is just a warm up for the impacts of climate change, really. And, you know, James, to come to you on that point, everything Peter said there, from what I understand, almost kind of encapsulates that type of disruptive thinking that you're looking for those B Corp members to be really developing and showing and just creating a community around. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, and just to that previous point, I think that the most important thing is not to necessarily think of it as a change of control, but a realignment of focus. You know, it's if you change the framing from we've got to kind of, as a business, we've got to change what we do to suit the candidate, to, you know, what if we really just try and focus on making what is arguably the biggest driver of this success of the business, the workforce, happy, motivated, committed, engaged. It kind of realigns the kind of the thinking around that. But I think one of the big things around that you mentioned, Paul, around kind of disruption and basically how we navigate this pace of change is that the idea of engaging with ESG or with your sustainability is actually kind of inextricably linked to, as I said before, building those muscles within the organization that help you to adapt to different situations. Yeah. And that's not only through the mechanism of, you know, working with your stakeholders to actually build kind of partnerships, you know, partnerships above and beyond a transactional relationship, but it's also about, you know, if we look at things like innovation, all theories around innovation are actually very, very similar to theories around sustainability. They're both about, let's look at the things that we are doing right now and have done in the past, and let's basically throw them up in the air and say, are these the most effective things that we have to do to actually get the end result? And often the case is no. And actually, sometimes it just takes a global pandemic to kind of actually necessitate these changes. Yeah. And so one of the things that we've certainly seen is that a real commitment and engagement to sustainability can actually breed this kind of bold disruption, kind of creativity and innovation. And in fact, we did a piece of research last year which compared the SMEs within the B Corp community with the SME business community population in the UK. And it actually found that 43% of the B Corp SMEs had applied for and received R&D tax credits in the last 3 years, compared with 6% of the kind of SME general population. And so there definitely is something there around like really digging into kind of your sustainability, but also kind of motivating people and motivating the workforce to actually think about everything differently and being flexible and responsive to that.
James, thank you for that. I'm going to move us on to a slightly different topic now, around looking at skill sets, but I'm going to be bold as well. And Richard, you've asked a question around leaders, and I just wonder if you can find the unmute button here, because you've asked about whether enough is being done to equip leaders in the 21st century. Can you expand on that? So it feels a bit like a loaded question.
Well, it's all usually is from me, Paul, as you know. I think there's a lot of discussion, and Peter and I have been having this discussion for a while about employers, employees, and their needs and wants. And I think there's very little discussion about how leaders lead this new workforce that's got 5 generations in the workforce, that has got a generation of leaders that have been brought up in a sort of ex-army style hierarchical leadership in offices, as Peter said, where people go to work. And I feel there's very little conversation about, well, what is the leader of the future likely to be? What is the balance of skills that is going to be needed to lead successful companies in the future? And I think one of the experiences of when we moved Brightside to fully working from home, my leadership team sort of fell into 3 camps. There were those that loved the managing by walking about and didn't bother with much data. They loved all their people, and that was their way of managing. They really, really struggled. Then the other end of the scale, you have people that just managed by data but had no empathy and had high turnover. And there was about a third in the middle ground who got that balance of empathy and data. And that seems to me something quite important. But I just feel there's so little discussion on this topic. And I don't believe that we're going to make all of this a success until we understand how leaders will lead in that. And I guess we'd like to hear from Peter and Matt and James on their view of leadership of the future.
Matt, can we kick off with you on that?
Yeah, so look, I think it's you mentioned some really valid points, and from a Robert Half perspective, we've had that as well. Obviously we've gone into times where unprecedented no book has been written, and we've asked people to manage in the grey, and that's been really, really tough. And we've rolled out our hybrid strategy, how we manage. We thought we were going to go with a defined 3 and 2, but we've kept it very fluid, and people have really struggled. So, one of the things that we've had to do is, we've got a great leadership development team here. We spent a lot of time, really working on people's sort of emotional intelligence. That is the critical factor in all of this. I think to be a great leader at the moment, you need to be able to take every situation or every person with empathy, understanding, humility, because one size doesn't fit all. And we've been a very, very hierarchical business. And I think we've been coaching our people that we're moving away from a leadership hierarchy to a leadership community. And lots of people need different things. Lots of people need to be managed very differently. And it's just coaching and developing people. We've had a lot of external speakers. We've invested in a leadership series. And spending a lot of time and really giving those people the toolkit, toolkit, a framework of how to manage, because that's the most important thing. And as a leader, we've all struggled. I've struggled. My guys have struggled understanding everyone's requirements. So I think it's coaching and developing, managing in the grey as we move forward, because we're going to make mistakes, and we talk about this a lot in Robert Half. You know, we all make mistakes, but as long as they're honest mistakes, then we'll learn from it, we'll move forward. And it's that authentic leadership that's required at the moment more than ever. Gone are the days of just managing by numbers or managing by, constantly being in the detail. You can't see everything now. And I think the how you manage now is it's those hybrid, when you get time together, to Peter's point, that community is absolutely critical. And I think that celebration and that's compassion. Are you okay? And you need to make sure. For us, we talk a lot about the check-ins, not the check-ups. You know, we used to be a very KPI-driven industry. Now we encourage people speaking to people that just aren't work-related. How are you? Are you okay? What do you need? And I think we're working really hard to create a culture within Robert Half of being a servant leader. That is, I think, the way forward. If we've got to be there for our people in the most challenging times. We see more mental health issues, support issues. Everyone's lost loads of different things, freedom, connection. And I think as leaders, this is our greatest test. The warm up is to happen, but as we go forward, if we don't have great leadership and we don't look after our people and invest in our people, we will lose them. So I think, that's what we're doing within Robert Half.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt, thank you for that. I mean, James, from your perspective, you're looking for this disruptive leadership from your B Corps. Do you agree with what Matt said? Do you have a particular vision of what your leaders need to be?
I mean, I think leadership comes in many forms, and I agree. I think with Richard that there hasn't been really enough kind of focus on actually how we talk about leadership in the 21st century, or in the post-pandemic world now, I guess we have to call it. And so, if we look at those, I think I have to agree with Matt, the idea of this, the kind of softer skills and making sure you've got a kind of a high amount of emotional intelligence. I think everyone's probably done those old kind of personality tests where maybe you've got kind of fast, you've got the speed of work on your x-axis, and you've got, on your y-axis, are you motivated by people or task? And it always used to be, a leader was, a fast worker focused on task. And that style of leadership is definitely moving towards someone that is focused more on people. And so I think there is still a really strong need for a leader to have a vision and to be setting out that vision. But there's also a need for kind of flexibility and humility in how to get there. So I guess I'd describe it as, have a compass and not a map. Set the direction, but let the employees and everyone around you kind of contribute to how you're going to get there.
And thank you, James. And it's great to see the comments coming through on the chat on this as well, as a highly emotive topic and the need for flexibility. That's great to see. I mean, Peter, there are, we've talked a number of times in this forum of the need for leadership to step up on particular topics. DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion, is one of those. To what extent will a company's approach, do you think, around diversity, equity and inclusion determine their success going forward?
I think it's going to be very, very significant and very important. I mean, it's a huge topic in itself, and I'll probably take an angle that looks at part of it. On the one hand, remote working has been a great leveler, has increased inclusion, made us more real to our colleagues, more included to an extent, and physical location has become less relevant when identifying access to talent, as I'm sure Matt would confirm. There's been significant impact on management style. Remote is forcing managers to become better communicators, improving actually satisfaction levels in terms of management communication. There's been a jump in transparency in communications, the level of engagement is possibly higher. But on the other hand, we've been reminded that people are people. We've seen people with their children, we've seen people with their dogs, we've seen their laundry, we've seen package delivery. I read a statistic somewhere that something as much as 15% of us have cried along with our colleagues in this environment. But the one thing I want to focus on is I think there's been plenty of losers as well. I spoke to a little bit about increased pressure on women with children, on younger and newer employees, and I think as well there's a bit of a risk that as we look forward, that we have to avoid the threat of a two-tier system developing, where hybrid creates this two-tier system. That people who come into the office will be able to advance more quickly and catch the eye of their managers more easily, and at the same time, those who choose to work at home are somehow going to lose out for not being there in person. And I did hear a quote from one of the American airlines that basically said something along the lines of, you can work wherever you like in the future, but those in the office are going to be those that progress. And I really think that we have to be extremely careful to avoid that. I do appreciate that there is a risk of presenteeism coming back, but I think it's really important that we create a working model that is inclusive, and we should use technology. We should use physical and remote locations and the way we think about all of that to ensure that all people remain connected and all people are included and all people have equal rights and equal involvement and equal inclusion. We shouldn't assume either that all managers will go back into the office. Let's again define the reasons for being there and what it means for people's presence, and make sure and understand people's motivations for social interaction, for human connection, and getting that right, I think, is going to be really, really critical as we look forward.
Thank you, Peter. And I know that linked to that topic as well, not just all those points you've spoken to, but also then ensuring that the ongoing health and mental well-being is managed as well. Again, that can be difficult for leaders to monitor, to step up to, and make sure amounts, the sufficient amounts are being invested in time and money into ensuring that is prioritized. Matt, as you look at health and mental well-being, not just within Robert Half, but how your clients are adapting to that. Do we need to be doing more in this space as we shift towards a hybrid model, which you said is here to stay?
Absolutely. I think, one of the silver linings of the pandemic is we've all worked out health is wealth, right? And stress is the fuel of illness. And what we're seeing, what we've driven hard in Robert Half is mandating people to take time out, because through all of this, I think Peter's used this comment, we're not working from home, we're living in work. And I think you've got to make sure you're giving people time out to decompress. Most of us can't get on a plane and go and have the holiday. So I think physical well-being, mental well-being, the companies that are getting the edge on this, war for talent are the people that put people at the heart of everything. Our people are our most important asset. We're seeing, here we do a lot of work with a company called Talk Training and Hapori Wellbeing. They do a lot of wellness seminars on nutrition, posture. We're all sat at home, sleep, hydration, all these key things. And it's not about just going for having a running club. It's little things, podcast clubs, book clubs. I think these things are really, really critical. It allows that connection that isn't about work. And you just need to give everyone a break. And I think, these providers that we work with a lot of the financial institutions. They're great. I can provide any information on that. But I think you've got to be really, really focused on that. It's so critical, and it's the most important thing. It really, really is. It's a great thing that people within Robert Half love. I've connected with people. It's made me feel better. I've never spent as much time, maybe out of my business, working on my business. So I think this reflection time, employee appreciation days, you can see in all the news that people are giving time off. The burnout rates the fatigue. Can't underestimate how tough it's been, and I think we've just got to realise that people have really worked harder than they've ever done. And whilst you have flexibility, maybe you're not travelling as much. I think the intensity is there. You know, we've all had tough situations, tough decisions, but if we don't have our people energised in a good space, feeling good, you know, having a good detailed program on mental health, making sure you've got mental health first aiders, all these things are absolutely critical. And, you know, if you don't, you know, effectively, if you want to have a good business, you've got to have great people, and the health and wealth and mindset of our people is the most important thing. That's what I've learned through all of this.
So Matt, thank you for that. Taking that, Matt, to you, James, in prioritising people, as Matt has just said, is there a conflict with profit there? And if so, how do your B Corps manage that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think I love the idea of I think Matt said building like a people-powered business. You know, being so focused on your people. I mean, we've had these kind of big conversations about kind of purpose or profit, but I think over the last few years we've seen that that's actually shifted. You know, we've seen companies that you could call kind of purpose and profit. You know, they've been doing really well as business, but they've also been managing their sustainability and making sure that they are not kind of contributing to these global challenges around social and environmental challenges. What we see now is you can actually point to companies that can talk really about profit through purpose. You know, they've been radically kind of focused on either things like the environment or on contributing to society, or radically focused on their people, and it's actually those mechanisms that have led to their profitability. You can point to the Patagonias of this world. A good example, I don't know if people know the chocolate company Tony's Chocolonely, that's kind of really increased its market share in the UK just in the last couple of years by basically having this bold ambition to be 100% slavery-free chocolate. And so it's really about kind of, as I said before, it's actually looking at your stakeholders, the people that are driving your business, or the things that are driving the success of your business, and being radically focused on them. And so, yeah, I would personally reject the dynamic that kind of puts profit and people kind of against each other, because people are just a critical asset to your business. So if you're radically focused on making sure they are happy, making sure they're motivated, they want to kind of be at work, they want to kind of do their best for the company because they see the success of their company as tied up in the success of themselves and the success of their values, I think, it's a recipe for profit through those mechanisms.
Okay. James, thank you ever so much. Look, we're almost out of time, but it feels like we're only getting started here. It feels like we're going for a while. I'm just going to come to each of you then, just to wrap us up here, because we've talked about a huge number of topics. Peter, if I may start with you, where do you see the biggest opportunity then for companies to make a step change in how they direct themselves to that workforce and workplace of the future? What do you want them to be doing over the next 5 years?
I think, as I said before, actually the smart organisations have recognised at the moment that nobody actually has the right answer. And we're starting to provide guidance and get thoughts together based on, data, workplace analytics, surveys involving our people and including our people. And actually the most successful organisations will be those that are very inclusive in that process, that think about those constituencies that I was talking about before, about our people, our clients, and us as employers, what it means to all of us in that, solving for that equation and being prepared to test, review and experiment over the next 6 to 12 months and throw away if it doesn't work and try something different. We're approaching a new phase. We're approaching a new set of challenges. We're not out of the tunnel yet. There's a lot of change ahead, but that's the exciting bit. there's an opportunity here really to change the paradigm and pick that up and move into the future and to use your phrase, Paul, not sleepwalk back into the past, he says with a smile.
I'm not sure where I got that from. Matt, quick closing comments from you, please. 30 seconds.
Yeah. Look, I'd say, it's really, really exciting times at the moment. I think we're really entering a really dynamic phase in the marketplace. I think, all I would say is, we've got to keep, to Peter's point, challenging, looking at doing things differently, and probably create a safe to fail environment within our organisations. I think those organisations need to create the opportunity for their people through coaching, mentorship, and sponsorship, and great leadership. To Richard's point. And create that community. People want to work for something bigger than themselves. And I think, creating purpose-driven brands, because I think success is an algorithm of process, managing it with discipline, people, managing them creatively, and quality. And if you do all of that, then things will happen. And I think it's a really interesting time. I come back to the people. That's, that's what I focus on. And I think look after your people, stay close to your people. They are your greatest asset, and I think if we have that at the heart of everything we do, every decision's based on that, what is right for our people, then it will be right for our business.
James, anything to add to that?
No, just that the biggest opportunity is not to, as you say, sleepwalk back in the office. Make sure that we have the models or the examples to look to inspire us, basically. And I think that's part of what the B Corp community is trying to do, is trying to show that companies can put people and planet alongside profit and be successful in doing so. So hopefully building those models to inspire others.
Brilliant. James, Peter, Matt, thank you so much. It's been a brilliant session. Really, really good. Very inspiring and some great insight. And I hope you've all enjoyed it too. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question, but hopefully we got to the spirit of most of what you asked. I'm over time. I'm going to get told off, but look, that's the end of this series. A big thank you to all the production team here: Layla, Gary, Jade, Sean, Kathy, Supriya, Becky, and everyone else. Thank you for everything you do and for making it all such a success. You can listen to this again on our website. You can see other things in the chat, and all the documents we published there about the talent report. So please do use those. And look, thank you all so much for joining us and making this whole Protiviti and Robert Half collaboration forum such a success. We will be back. We will be back with something that we hope is even more relevant to you going forward. So until then, on behalf of my Protiviti and Robert Half team, thank you all so much. Best wishes to you all. Stay safe, be bold, be kind to each other, be bold, be inspired, and we look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Paul.
Well done, Paul.